What's up guys, this is Voxside and welcome to another After Effects in Cinema 4D tutorial. So in the first part of this tutorial we will be modeling this Predator Smart Disk inside Cinema 4D and also texture and rig this object. So as you can see, if I grab these claws here, you can see that I have a special controller that creates this sort of unsheathing animation. Alright, and in the second part we will be focusing only on our animation and also camera movement. And the reason I am making that into a separate part is because the animation is gonna be pretty complex and dynamic, and I just want a separate part that focuses only on that aspect of our project. And then in the last part we will be creating some particles, some fog particles with particular, and also just bring all the elements together and add some final color correcting and finishing touches. So let's get started with the first part, which will be the modeling. So I will create a new project here, and before I get started I will want to go in my front view here, and if I go to my options I can click on configure. And over here you can see that in my back tab I have a slot where I can import any image. And for my image I will be using a reference that I found on Google. So I will be using this image, and I will be including this image in the project files that you can download by following the link in the description of the video. And here I can set the transparency to be maybe 50%, so I don't really need it to be that bright, so maybe 70%, just enough so I can see exactly what I'm doing. Alright, let's start with this disk part in the center here. So I will be using a let's see, I can go and create a disk. Alright, and I can go to disk orientation, and I will set this to be a plus Z. Alright, and this just flips it. And now in my front view I can go and just reposition this and rescale this. So the shortcut for the move tool is E, and then the scale tool will be T, and then the rotation tool will be R. Alright, so I will be using the shortcuts quite a lot during this, and yeah. So let's scale this and place it into position. Alright, and if I go in my perspective view and if I press NB, I can see the wireframe, and in my disk settings over here I can change the rotation segments, so if I want more geometry or less geometry, but the settings that the disk has by default will be fine. So I can go ahead and press C to turn this into an editable object. And now I want to split this disk in two separate halves, and what I can do is go in my polygon mode here, and if I press space, this will switch to my live selection tool, and I can just select all of these polygons on the second half of this disk. Alright, and if I press U and P, this will now create a separate object only with the half that we had selected. And then in my original object I can go ahead and delete the polygons that we had selected. And also if you go to your points mode and press Ctrl A to select all points, I can right click and optimize, and this will get rid of all the unused points from the previous polygons that we deleted. Alright, so essentially what I have now are two separate objects, as you can see. And let's go back in our front view, and for my second object, so this guy at the bottom here, I can go in my polygon mode and select all of these towards the center, so all these polygons. So I'm only keeping this loop here, and I can press delete, go to my point mode and press Ctrl A and optimize to get rid of the points. Alright, so this is what we got so far, and let's select this first piece, and for this piece I will actually select my polygon mode and get rid of half of these polygons. Alright, so press delete and then go to my point mode and optimize. I will place this disk in a symmetry object now. So just drop a symmetry object and make the disk a child of the symmetry object. And you can see it already mirrors on the right plane, which will be ZY. And I'm just gonna increase the tolerance here to 0.05, just to make sure that the vertices are welded towards the middle here. And now I will grab this disk inside the symmetry object and go in my front view. I will press I for my magnet tool. And now if I hold my middle mouse button and drag it from left to right, you can see this increases or decreases my brush size. And also by holding your middle mouse button and dragging up or down, you can decrease or increase the intensity of the brush. Alright, so I'm just gonna choose maybe a strength of maybe 40%, and the size for the brush should be fine. And I'm just gonna start dragging these points around and try to shape it according to our reference. Alright, so I'm looking at the reference behind our disk. Just try to match it to our image. Alright, so I'm just clicking and dragging and just moving all of these points around. And this should be fine. And now if I go in my perspective view, you can see here that these edges in the middle are now kind of messed up, and we can correct this if I select my edge mode and press E for my move tool. I can now double click and this will make a loop selection. Alright, so this will select all of the edges in the middle here. And now I can press T for scale, and if I drag this on the x-axis, you can see that this flattens out our line. Alright, and I can hold shift and this will now use increments of 10 to scale. And now I can scale this down exactly to 0%. Alright, and this will make them completely flat. And if I drag them until they match over here, alright, so you can see that it snaps towards the center. And now we have our perfect symmetry back. So whenever I'll need some perfect edge alignment, I'll just grab the loop and then just scale them down on their respective axis. Alright. Alright, so now I can select the symmetry object and press C, and this will turn my disk into an editable object and weld these two parts together into one object. And if I go in my point mode and press MC, this will be my brush tool, and just make sure your brush tool is set to smooth over here in the mode. And again, you can use your middle mouse button to increase the size of the brush and the intensity of the brush. And now I just want to come in here and just try to relax some of these polygons, and just try to smooth out our topology just a bit, right, and just make it a cleaner mesh. So now I want to add some thickness to this disk, and I will select my first object here, my first disk. Press Ctrl A to select all of these polygons, and if I hold down Ctrl and then move the polygons on the Z axis, you can see that this creates a nice extrusion, and this will just give it some thickness, and maybe around this place will be fine. Let's go ahead and grab both of these objects and press Alt G, and this will create a new group. Alright, and this group will be my disk. And if I place this disk inside a symmetry object, so drop a symmetry object, place the disk as a child of the symmetry, and in the symmetry I will change the mirror plane to X, Y, and this will be our correct mirror plane. And I will also use again a tolerance of 0.05 just to make sure that everything's welded in the middle. And let's create some thickness for my second disk object here. So grab this object, go to my polygon mode, Ctrl A to select all the polygons, and then just hold Ctrl and drag it over and create a extrusion. Alright. Also on this second object, alright, maybe I don't want this to be as thick, so I will just adjust this a bit. And maybe for this second disk as well, I'm just gonna drag this over a bit and try to thin out this width over here. And this will be fine. Alright, let's go to our second object, and with these polygons selected, I will press W, and this will create an inner extrusion. So if I drag this now, you can see what this does. And again, if I go to my move tool, so that's E, and now as I drag this over by holding down Control, I can create this nice inner extrusion here and just add a little bit more detail to our geometry. Alright, and I'll do the same thing for this first disk. So with these polygons on the outside selected, press MW for inner extrusion. Just drag this in a bit, and then I can grab these polygons and also drag them to the side here and just create this extrusion. Alright, so now if I place this symmetry object inside the subdivision surface object, so make the symmetry a child of the subdivision surface, you can see that this will smooth out everything, but it also smooths out our corners. And I want to keep some of the tightness around some of these polygons. So let's first disable the subdivision surface. Let's go in our first disk object, and I will actually set this to be invisible, so the first disk object, so I can see what I'm doing here for my second disk. And I will actually grab these polygons here at the end of the object, so also on this other side, and just delete these because we won't be seeing this and we won't be needing them. And also this guy over here, and let's also delete this guy over here. Alright, and I'll go in my edge mode here and press K for my knife tool. And then in my knife tool I can set the mode to loop, and I'll just add some edge loops over here where I want the geometry to sort of stay tight. Alright, so the more geometry you have in one place, the more tight it will be when you add the subdivision surface deformer. Alright, so I'm just adding subdivisions where I know I want to preserve the tightness of the edges. So press K, and I'm gonna add another loop here, and let's grab this point here, press S to zoom in on this point so it's easier to navigate. Press K and just add a couple of edge loops over on the side as well. And now let's go in my object mode, and if I turn on a subdivision surface now you can see that some of these edges are preserved, and we have this nice rounding just at the crease of the edges. And let's unhide this first disk object as well and do the same for this guy. So let's disable subdivision surface for now, and I will actually hide the second disk object. And for my first one, let's go again inside the edge mode and press K for my knife tool and just add some subdivisions over around our edges. And I also want a loop that goes on this side as well, so I want this corner to be tight. Alright, and just add my loops where I know I will need them, and let's add the loops on the other side as well, or actually it mirrored over, so we only need another loop here. And let's take a look and see how this looks. So if I turn on subdivision surface, you can see that we are having, well, it does what we want, but we are having some issues on this side, so I want this to be nice and round here. Let's turn this off and see what our geometry looks like here. Alright, so maybe I can grab this edge loop here, and let's go ahead and dissolve it for now. So dissolve will get rid of any edges and points as well. And let's also get rid of this guy on the other side as well. And now if I turn on subdivision surface, alright, everything works and it's nice and round, and we still maintain our the tightness on these corners here and our edges. Alright, and now I can unhide the second disk object. And if I go in my front view, so that's pretty much it for this disk part. We can move on to create these blades. And also you can cycle through your shading modes by pressing N, and then here you can see that NA will be shaded and NB will be shaded with the wireframe, and NG is just the wireframe. Alright, so that's something to keep in mind. And let's move forward for our blades. I will start off by creating a plane object. Let's set this plane to be on our plus Z and flip this over. And for this plane, I want to set the width and height segments to 1 and 1. I'll press C to make this editable. Hop inside my front view here and just rescale this. And I will just try to create this first segment of this blade. So I'm just going to try to roughen out the shape of this first segment by using a simple plane. And I can go ahead and grab individual vertices here and just place them around and try to recreate this shape. Alright, so that's pretty good, and I can go ahead now and press K for my knife tool, and I want to add an edge loop over around the middle, so maybe around this part, and maybe another guy here and another guy here, and this will just create some geometry for me to work with. And now if I switch to my move tool, I can go ahead and grab all of these individual points, move them around, and try to roughen out my shape here for this first segment. And I think this will be fine. I'm gonna add another edge loop in the middle over on this side, and maybe add another edge loop in the middle here. So you can see how easily that is to create some geometry and subdivisions. And I can go ahead now and I'm just gonna try to give this some thickness. So I can grab this edge loop here in the center, and I'll just drag this over, and also drag this guy over as well, and just try to give this object some width. And also I will rename this object to blade 1, and this will be the first segment, so I'll just rename it to blade 1. And I want to place this inside the null object as well, so I will select this object and Alt G, and this will create a new group. Alright, and this group I want to place inside the symmetry object as well, so drop a symmetry, place the null inside the symmetry, and this symmetry I'll set the mirror plane to be on the X, Y, and now everything looks fine. So we can move on. And for this object, for my first segment here, you can see that it has some extrusion detail in the center. And let's go ahead and try to recreate this extrusion here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and grab my knife tool, set the mode to line, and just create a couple of segments here. So maybe one over on this side and maybe one over on this side. Let's also create another edge here and here. Oh, sorry, so from this side to this side. And now I can grab these edges here and right click dissolve, so I won't be needing those. And let's go to my polygon mode and grab these polygons now, and I can go ahead and hold Control and just extrude these out. Alright, and I won't be needing these polygons at the top here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and delete them. And let's go to my point mode, Control A and optimize. And now I can readjust this shape a bit, and I'm just gonna move these points a bit, and maybe also this point here at the bottom. Alright, and I can see that the geometry is intersecting with our disk here, and I don't want that. So what I can do is simply grab this entire object, and if I press T for scale, I can just scale this down only on the Z-axis and just try to thin this out a bit. And also I forgot to add some geometry on the disk as well. And if I select my first disk and turn off subdivision surface, and now in my polygon mode, I can go ahead and I will select only these polygons in the center here. So all this loop up until the last polygon, so I don't want these last polygons selected over at the bottom here. So with this selection now I can press MT, and now I can create an inner extrusion here. Alright, and now I just need to, let's actually hide this blade for now, and let's come and grab these polygons in the center here and just delete these. And press delete, go to your point mode, Control A, right click and optimize. And let's add our edge loops here to maintain our edge tightness for our subdivisions. Add another loop here and here. and maybe even one loop over on this side as well. Alright, and let's go to our subdivision surface and see how this looks. Alright, we also need to add some loops over on the other side as well. And let's go to my edge mode and let's add another loop. Let's see, another loop over here. Alright, and turn on subdivision surface. You can see here that the geometry for our second disk is sort of is intersecting with our first disk, and I can go ahead and press MI and just go ahead and go in my front view here and just try to readjust this geometry a bit, just so it's not intersecting with our first disk. Alright, and let's grab this first disk. Let's go to my edge mode, select the edges in the middle here, and I will press T for scale and just scale this out on the Z-axis and just flatten this out, and this will make sure that everything is nice and welded towards the center. So now this is looking fine and we can move forward with our blade. So let's unhide this. Alright, and for this blade I want to create some thickness over on these edges at the top here. So I will go in my edge mode and let's grab these edges on the top here. So all of these edges here at the top, and I will hold Control and move these over. This will create an extrusion. And now let's turn off our symmetry object and let's step inside our point mode. Just select these points and move them around and just make sure that everything is nice and properly aligned. So I'm just gonna try and just realign, reposition some of these points to create a nice edge extrusion here. And also on this other side as well. Alright, so now when I mirror this, everything should be fine. I can also go ahead and add some edge loops now. So press K for your knife tool and let's add an edge loop here. Add another edge loop here and maybe here as well, and on the other side as well. So here and maybe another guy here. And let's see how this will look. So let's go ahead and drop a subdivision surface object and set the symmetry as a child. And everything's looking pretty fine actually. Kind of like how this looks. Let's go inside our front view and check out our reference. So I can grab this blade now and press MI for my magnet tool. And you can see that the subdivision surface sort of thins everything out. So I will need to come here and readjust this object just so it matches with our reference. So you can see that these orange edges here is how our geometry normally looks like. And I'm just using the hard dark edges as a reference for how the geometry looks like with the subdivision surface applied. Alright. Alright, so this will be the first segment of our blade, and let's move on with our second segment. So I'm pretty much going to be using the same technique with the plane for all of these segments. So let's go and add a new plane here. Set the plane width and height to 1 and 1 and the orientation to +Z. Let's make this editable by pressing C, and let's press T for scale and scale this out and just reposition this. Let's go inside our reference here, and now I can grab the individual points and just use these to set up the bounds sort of for this second segment. And now I can go ahead and press K for my knife tool, and let's just add some edge loops here, get some geometry going, and let's actually just rearrange the points that we already have now. So grab this guy and just move these over a bit. This will be fine, and let's press K. And I want to add an edge loop where the sharp part of the blade will be, so maybe here, and then just add another loop and maybe a couple of loops actually to just create the thickness. Alright, and let's go ahead and readjust the new points. So grab my move tool and just reposition them. I can also press MI and use the magnet tool to readjust this shape. Alright, and if I go in my perspective view, I can see here that the object is not in the proper position, so I'm just gonna go ahead and I'll set the Z coordinate to 0 here, and this will just place it in the center of our scene. And let's go ahead and set this plane. Let's rename this to blade underscore 2. Place it inside our null group here, so this will be our blades. Let's turn off subdivision surface for now and just focus on my second blade segment here. And let's go ahead and go to my edge mode and grab these edges, just move them around and just create our shape here. So give it some thickness. And I want this shape, I want this second segment to be larger than our first segment. So I'm just gonna readjust these edges. Alright, and let's also grab this edge loop here and also readjust this guy. And just make sure that it's not intersecting with our first blade segment. So make sure it's large enough. Alright, and now I'll just give this blade some thickness here. So if I grab these edges at the top, I'm gonna do the same thing and create an extrusion. Select my points and just reposition them. Just move this until it snaps towards the center here. Alright, and also at the bottom as well. Drag them over. And let's do the same for the bottom portion as well. So grab these edges, double click to select the edge loop, create the extrusion and just reposition these points now. And let's actually hide the first blade segment so I can focus on the second one. So just make sure that they snap towards the center here. And I'm actually gonna set the symmetry object to 0.05 as well. And let's grab this guy at the bottom here, and this will be our last point to adjust. Alright, and all I have to do now is create our edge loops. So press K for knife tool and add another edge loop here. Add an edge loop over on the other side as well. And also I want to add some edges on this part as well. So this will give it our blade sharpness, and also add one here and here. So wherever I want the edges to have a nice crease in subdivisions, I'm just adding geometry loops around the edges. Alright, and turn on subdivision surface, and this is looking fine. Let's unhide my first segment here. And this is actually pretty fine. Let's go ahead and readjust our second blade here. So press MI and just drag them over a bit and make sure that the subdivision surface geometry matches with our reference. Alright, so this will be fine. Let's go ahead and create our third segment now. So drop a plane, set the width and height to 1 and 1, orientation to +Z. Press C to make this editable, and let's go ahead and reposition this and rescale and try to match our reference here. Alright, so grab these points and move them around. Let's grab our knife tool and make some add some subdivisions to this. Just to readjust this now. And I'm not worried about this guy here for now. So for this tiny extrusion here, I can just grab this edge and hold control and just drag this out and just create an extrusion here, and this will be our this tiny little guy here. Alright, and reposition some of these points maybe. And also add another subdivision here towards the center and just add a little bit more shape to this. Alright, let's add a loop where our sharpness will start, so maybe here, and add another loop maybe here. And let's go inside our perspective view and let's adjust these edges now. And for this back portion here, I will grab all of these edges, so all the edges in the back here, and I'm gonna move this over a bit just so it matches with the curvature of our second segment, and just control and drag this over to create an extrusion. And let's make sure that these are nice and flat, and this will be fine. And let's set them to be exactly in the center of our scene. So I'll set this Z value to 0. Alright, and if I place this inside our blades, and let's rename this to blade underscore 3 and turn off subdivision surface for now. Our symmetry works fine, and let's go ahead and hide the second blade segment and work on our extrusions here. So let's maybe grab this edge and readjust its position a bit. Alright, and grab these edges here and create an extrusion. Let's go to our point mode and readjust the points. And also do the same for our bottom edges as well. Alright, and now I can go ahead and add my edge loops. So press K for knife tool and let's add our loops. And I'll also add some loops on this side as well. And maybe here. Alright, and let's see how this looks with our subdivision. Alright, so not bad. Let's unhide our second blade, and now we only have to take care of our final blade segment, and let's go ahead and create a plane. I'll just do the same thing, set this to 1 and 1, set the orientation to +Z and make this editable, and let's move this into position. Let's rescale and let's maybe rotate this a bit. Let's grab the points and just place them into position. Alright, so now I'm actually gonna press K for my knife tool. So let's add a loop, maybe at the center here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and grab this edge here and move this over, maybe rotate this a bit, just place it into position. And what I can do with this edge is if I press MS for my bevel tool, you can see that I can drag this out and it will split this segment, or this edge rather, into two. And if I increase the subdivisions here, I can very easily create this nice curvature. And now I can just press MI for my magnet tool and just reshape this and make sure it matches with our reference. Alright, so now I will grab my knife tool and add another segment here. And I'm just gonna add this segment, and this will be fine for our last shape here. So let's rename this to blade 4, Let's place this in our blades group and turn off subdivision surface for now and hide our third blade. And let's go ahead and I'm actually gonna unhide the third blade for now and just grab these polygons in the back here and just move them out to create the thickness. And I can go ahead now and grab all of these edges in the back and extrude them. Alright, so just make sure that they snap in the center here. And now I can simply go ahead and bridge these two edges at the top here. So press B for your bridge tool and just click and drag from one edge to the other, and this will just fill in the geometry here. And I also want to taper this shape toward the top here, just so it's nice and pointy, and just try to readjust some of these edges a bit. Alright, so something like this. And let's add our edge loops now, and let's maybe hide the third blade segment now. And I won't be adding any thickness to this segment because we won't be seeing that part anyway. So just add some edge loops here and maybe another one here, and everything should be fine now. So let's turn on subdivision surface and unhide my third blade, and this will be our blade. Now of course that I will be using a cloner for the rest of the blades, but first I want to create a rig for this blade. So what I mean by this is I want to add a special controller for this blade that will control sort of how the blade comes out of the disc. Alright, and for this I will grab the symmetry object and just drop it outside of our subdivision surface. And now I can just press C, and this will just turn everything editable and mesh our symmetry object inside our meshes. Alright, so now each blade is fully symmetrical. So the first step in creating this rig will be to change the pivot of rotation for all of these segments. So what I mean by this is if I grab my first blade and if I try to rotate this, you can see that it rotates from the center here where our pivot is, and I want to change this. So I will enable axis here, and let's go in my front view and let's move this pivot right in the position where I want the rotation to start from. Alright, and now if I rotate this, you can see that it rotates from this spot, and this will help in creating our rig. Let's go to our second blade and also move this guy maybe in the corner here, and do the same for my third blade. So place it towards where our rotation will start from, and also the same for our blade 4. And maybe somewhere around this spot, and I can go ahead and readjust these spots if necessary later on. Alright, maybe somewhere towards the middle here, and this will be fine for now. Alright, so if I go in my blade 1 object and I go to coordinates, you can see that the rotation B is the value that needs to be affected, and I want to link all of our blades as rotation B value to a separate individual controller. And I'll place this controller on our blades group, and I can go ahead and just get rid of the symmetry object. So I can go in my blades group here, and inside user data I can select add user data. And this will just add my special controller, and this works similar to how expression controller works inside After Effects. And I can give this a name, and you can name this to whatever you want. I'll just name this to rotation. And the data type will be float, which is good, and the unit type will be degree, alright, because we're working with the degrees. And I will turn off limit min and max and hit OK. And now I will use Espresso to link this user data to the rotation B for each of these objects. Alright, and let's set this to 0, and I will right click the blades group and add the Cinema 4D text Espresso, and let's go ahead and drop the blades null inside Espresso, and let's set this output to be our user data rotation. Alright, so I want to link this to all of these individual objects rotation, and select all of them and place them inside Espresso as well, and this will be all of my blades. And now the input for all of these blades will be our rotation. Let's see, our rotation B. Alright, so I'll go ahead and for my input here, I will go to coordinates, go to rotation and select rotation B. And do the same for the rest of these guys. So make sure it's a rotation and not global rotation. So go to rotation, rotation B, rotation, rotation B, coordinates, rotation, rotation B. Alright, and now I will simply link all of these values together. And now if I go in my blades null object and go to my user data, you can see that as I increase the rotation value here, all of these rotation of the objects change. And now all I have to do is link all of these blades to be part of a hierarchy. So I will set the blade 4 to be a child of blade 3, blade 3 to be a child of blade 2, and blade 2 to be a child of blade 1. And now this works sort of like how the joints would work. So when I move the first blade, the whole rest of the chain is affected. And now as I increase the rotation here, you can see that all of the blades are affected sort of incrementally and creating this nice cascading effect. Alright, and this is simply how I created the rig for the blades. And now I can just use this value to create this nice cool animation of the blades spreading and opening up. So now all I have to do is set up a cloner for our blades and create the rest of our blades. And before I do that, I just want to make sure that the pivot of this blade group, so our null object, has the correct pivot. And I'm gonna turn on enable axis here and just move this down a bit, so the pivot of this group right towards the center of our disk. So maybe set the X to 0 and just move it towards the center here. So this is where I will want the cloner to rotate all of our clones from. And I think this will be fine. Let's go ahead and drop a cloner. Let's set the blades inside the cloner here, and let's set this to be a radial. Let's set the radius for 0, and I know I need 6 of these. And I will turn off fixed clones, and let's increase, or rather decrease, the end angle and just increase the start angle here. So you can kind of see what I'm creating here, and I can also spread these out a bit and maybe move this over, maybe spread this out. And I can place this cloner inside the subdivision surface that we had from earlier and see how this will look subdivided. And this is actually looking pretty good. So now we can go ahead and create our textures. And the first step here will be to create a new material. So you can double click in your material window over here to create a new material. And I will just place this material on top of our cloner for now. And then also place this same material on top of the disk group. Alright, and I'll actually place this material on the blades group as well. Alright, and let's access our material and start creating our texture here. So let's name this to, actually I'll just name this texture to base. Alright, so this will be our base texture, and we'll add another texture on top of that, which will be our rust and extra detail. So for this base material, I'm gonna turn off reflectance for now and just go to my diffusion channel, turn this on, and use a texture noise. And then if I go inside the noise, I can set this noise type to be Luca, alright, which is this noise over here. And I'm just gonna increase the scale here to something like this, and maybe make the base color. So in our color channel, I'll just lower the brightness for our base color. Alright, and I can see that the texture is not mapping properly on our objects, and I will select both of these texture slots, and for my projection I'm gonna choose cubic. And then if I turn on seamless, now I have the correct projection, and the texture is mapping properly on the objects. Let's go back inside this base material and do some further editing here. Let's turn on reflectance, and I will disable default specular layer, and let's add a new layer which will be GGX. And GGX works pretty good with metals in general, And right away I will turn off the specular strength, so I won't be needing this. And let's see what else we can do here. Let's go to our layer mask, and I want to kill some of these reflections. So if you can check this material here in a separate window, you can see that it's fully 100% reflective, and we can easily kill some of these reflections if you set the layer mask texture to be a Fresnel. Right, and now you can see what this does over here. So you can use this Fresnel channel to just decrease some of the reflectivity, so it's not 100% reflective. And if you want to add more reflectivity, you can simply decrease the mix strength. I usually use a 50% mix strength when I'm using Fresnel, and then I'm just controlling the overall amount of reflections, and maybe somewhere around 25% should be fine for this. And we'll make some test renders and maybe change this later on if we need to. Let's increase the roughness to maybe 8%, and this will make our reflections a bit more blurry. And let's see what else we have here, and this will be fine for now. Let's go ahead and I will create a sky. And for this sky, I will be using a custom HDRI. So make a new material, go inside your luminance channel and disable the rest of the channels. And for my luminance texture, I'm going to use a warehouse HDRI, and I will be including this in the download as well. So you can place this on your sky object, and then this sky object is what's gonna be creating the reflections on our Shuriken. And I don't really need to see this sky, so I'm just gonna go ahead, right click and add a Cinema 4D tags and add a compositing tag. Let's set the compositing tag to, let's uncheck seen by camera, and now this will make it invisible, but the reflections will be affected by this sky object. You just won't render it or see it in the viewport. And I can make a quick test render now, so Shift R to create a render. And this is looking pretty fine. The reflections, if you want to make them more reflective, you can go to your reflectance and just increase your amount in the layer mask. So if I increase this to maybe 50% and make a render now, you can see that it's a lot more reflective, but I'm just going to keep this as my original 25%. Let's also go ahead and I will press Ctrl B for my render settings, and I will switch this renderer to physical. And in my physical tab here, I'm going to set the sampling to be maybe, this will be fine. Let's maybe just set the error threshold to 10%. And also go in my options here and decrease the reflection depth to 2. Alright, this will just speed up our renders a bit without losing too much detail. And we'll also need a ambient occlusion effect, so you can right click in this window here and just choose ambient occlusion. And this should be fine for now. And let's go ahead and go to our base layer. And I want to add another layer of reflections, so I'm going to go ahead and add another GGX layer. And for this layer, I'm going to turn off the specular strength as well. Let's go to our bump strength, and let's set this mode to be custom bump map. Alright, and then for our custom texture, I'm going to choose a noise. And inside this noise, I'm going to set the noise to be Luca. And let's open window here and see exactly what we are doing. So if I decrease the global scale maybe to 15%, I want to use this second layer of reflectivity to create some specks. And this will just give the metal a bit more of a rough look and just add a bit more detail and maybe a bit of realism. Alright, and the way I'm gonna blend this second layer to our first initial layer is if I go to layer Fresnel, I can set the Fresnel to be dielectric, and then I will set the strength to be maybe 95%. Alright, and you can check what this does over here. And maybe go inside our noise and just increase, let's scale this up a bit. So I'm just gonna increase the low clip and decrease the high clip and just create more contrast in our noise. And you can see now that our material has these tiny specks, and this will just help create an uneven and unperfect material and just add that little bit of realism. And I will set this layer to add. Alright, and let's make a preview render now. So Shift R. Alright, so here is our render, and for example, let's disable this specs layer and make a render to see the difference better. So this will be a render without the specs. So you can kind of see that our specs just add a little bit more reflectivity and a little bit more noise and bumps in our metal. Alright, and just create an overall more realistic look. Alright, so let's turn this back on, and this will be fine for our base layer. And let's create another layer now. Let's duplicate this base layer, so I'm just gonna hold Control and drag this over, and I will rename this to Rust. Alright, and inside my color channel I'm gonna set the texture to be a noise. Let's go inside this noise, and I will set the noise to be Luca. And for my second color here I'm gonna choose a dark orange, something like this. And for my first color, let's go with something like a yellow, just a nice washed out yellow. So this will be sort of like my rust colors. Let's maybe add a little bit more orange to this, so something like this, and maybe increase the contrast a bit. Let's actually go inside our color channel here, and I will set this texture to be a layer. And now if I step inside the texture, I can go ahead and add an effect and add a brightness contrast gamma. And now if I increase the contrast, I can I can pretty much bring a bit more red into the mix. So I'm just looking to create some colors for our rust. Alright, and now I can turn on alpha channel. And for texture, I'm also going to use a noise, and this noise will also be a Luca. Maybe increase the scale a bit, and you can see what this does over here. It's going to use this noise as a mask, and now if I apply this layer on top of my previous layer, you can see that it's using the noise to create these rust spots around our objects. And I'll also actually, let's change this projection to cubic for our second material, turn on seamless, and then just copy this material onto our disk as well. And let's just make a quick render preview. Alright, so you can see now that we have some rusty spots around our object now, and let's go ahead and make some further changes to our rust. So let's go inside the reflectance here, and I will get rid of my second layer of reflection, so the specs, and just keep the first one. And for my first one, I will maybe set the intensity to maybe 10%. So I know that rust isn't gonna catch as much reflections as a normal metal would. Let's go in our alpha channel here, and for our noise I'm just gonna increase the contrast here so we get some harsher spots for our rust. Let's make a render. Alright, so slightly better. I'm actually gonna go ahead and inside this noise I'm gonna increase the scale for my noise here. So I want larger spots of rust, and maybe decrease some of this contrast a bit, and make another preview. Alright, so a little closer. Let's maybe decrease the brightness for our noise, just so our rust layer is a bit more transparent. Alright, so that's pretty good. I'm actually gonna go inside my base layer and go to my second layer, which is the specs for our reflection, and just turn this down maybe to 50%, so I don't want them to be as noticeable in our render. Alright, so just get rid of a bit of those specs. And this will be our final material. Now I have to admit, texturing is not really my strong point, and this is more of a starting point more than anything. So normally you would go ahead and create a lot more materials and just add a lot more layers of noise and detail, and to achieve a much more realistic and better look. But this will be close enough for this tutorial. But if you have any suggestions, you can leave them in the comments below, and I'll make sure to read them. And before we move on to our second part, there's one more thing that we have to deal with, and that is our texture mapping. And what I mean by this is if let's select this blade and let's go to my rotation, and if I increase the rotation, you can see, if you keep your eyes on the texture itself, you can see that the texture doesn't move with our objects, and that's because the texture is applied to a group of objects rather than each object individually. Alright, so what we have to do to fix this, I'll just set this to 0. And there's one way to fix this. I'm gonna set these texture slots on our cloner, and I'm gonna press C while having the cloner selected, and this will just make all of the clones editable. So press C, and now each clone is an object by itself, and we can control the animation by selecting all of the blade groups and just increasing the animation, so we haven't lost our animation controls. Set this to 0, and let's get rid of this null here. And what I can do now is, if I select these texture slots, I can right click and I will select copy tag to children. Alright, and now I can get rid of these on the cloner. And now as I select the blades and increase the rotation, you can see that our texture sticks each to its individual object. Alright, so everything is working properly now. So let's set this back to 0, and I will do the same for our disk. Let's actually make the symmetry object editable, and let's grab this disk and place it outside of my symmetry object and delete this subdivision surface. And let's go ahead and just do the same for this guy as well. So I'm just gonna copy my texture slots to my first disk, and then hold Control and copy them to our second disk as well. Right, so now our disk, if I rotate this, our textures stick. And now I want to create a group that will contain all of our objects. So I'm gonna use this disk as our group holder, and grab these two disks and press Alt G to make a new group. I'll name this disk, and this guy I'll rename to, let's just rename this to Shuriken. And now I simply have to place this cloner inside the Shuriken group, and I'll rename this cloner to blades, and this will be my blades group and my disk group. And I will place the blades group and my disk group, press Alt G to create a new group, and this will be my subdivision group. And now I will place the subdivision surface as a child of the Shuriken and place the subdivision group inside the subdivision surface. So now if I move this Shuriken group, I can go ahead and create the rotation and grab the individual blades and create the animation for the blades individually. Right, and everything works, and this will be our rig. So that's pretty much it for the first part of this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay tuned for part 2. Make sure to drop a like if you learned anything new, and I will see you in the next part.